Welcome to the Modern Medicine Movement Podcast. Phew, let's go. All right, welcome, guys. So pumped, so grateful, so happy to be back here with you. Another week, another day. Beautiful day here. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I'll be in Hawaii for the next several months coming up. I'm just pumped about that. I've enjoyed my time recently in Utah. I've been able to spend time with my family, my mom, all of those that I care about so much, and it's been amazing. I got to be honest, it's so many beautiful places in the world, everywhere from the mountains to the sea, to the lakes, to the oceans. Shoot, my wife and I were so blessed. We got to go to Europe recently, and it was incredible. Oh my gosh, talk about the most amazing food. Oh, it's so wonderful over there. I can't wait to go back, but it inspired me for a lot of things because, here I really feel like sometimes we get so busy and we don't really want to cook. And, we gotta somehow figure out how to change that, because if we cook at home, we can change everything. It's just so amazing. When you eat out here, at least in the US, that's been my experience, that most of the places you eat out, the quality of the food just really isn't there. They're using so many not so awesome ingredients. They have these Cisco trucks dropping by all these very processed oils and fake butters and all this kind of garbage that's just not amazing. And they never disclose any of the stuff in the menu. So I'm not saying to never eat out, but just ask some questions. Try to find out what your food is being cooked in. And if you're buying fried foods, beware, because I can almost guarantee you they're not being cooked in the healthier oils like olive oil, coconut oil, and that sort of thing. It's most often these highly processed seed oils. And if you want more on that, you got to go check out my podcast on the seed oils. It is eye-opening. But anyway, let's get to the point and let's just get into this week's podcast. I'm so pumped. I'm so grateful to be here with you. Dr. Thomas Hemingway here. I don't know about you, but sometimes I think in life we feel like we might be going around in circles, doing the proverbial spinning our wheels or treading water. We just can't seem to, stay afloat, or we can't seem to meet our health goals or our life goals, whatever that may be. And we just seem like we're spinning. Well, guys, I know that feeling. I've been there. I've struggled with my health, and I've struggled with many things and often felt like I was spinning my wheels. And there is a better way. In fact, I've created a group called the Thrive Community to help answer your questions, to give you more access to me, to be able to ask questions. We do live Zoom calls. We do trainings once a week. We have a thread where all the folks there can ask questions. I have office hours where I'll hop on and I'll do nothing but answer their questions. It's such a great community. I hope you guys will all have a chance to jump on in. It's very affordable, very reasonable. Literally, it's less than the price of going out to dinner once a month with your sweetheart, which I still recommend you do, but I'm telling you, it's just I've never seen anyone complain or, regret investing in their health. Like literally, as a physician of over 20 years, I've seen the converse happen a lot, where people are wishing they had done things differently. They're wishing they could dial back the clock and change a lot of their health habits because it has led them to the place where they are. Maybe it is with heart disease or diabetes or obesity or even cancer. Many of these things, in fact, they are almost entirely preventable with the way that we choose to decide simple health goals, what we end up putting at the end of our fork, what makes it into the shopping cart or basket in the grocery store is so critical. And in this community, my Thrive community, we talk about all things health. We talk about, the important things with respect to food, with respect to how to optimize stress, optimize sleep, optimize movement, so many different things, even mental health. We talk about all these things, and it's a kind of deep in the weeds, get in there, ask your questions. We support one another. It's an amazing community. I hope you guys will have the chance to jump on in. On the link here on Instagram, there's a link to the Thrive community as well on the modernmedicinemovement.com website. on the podcast, on the Instagram, Facebook. You can find it almost anywhere. There's a link. Probably the easiest place is just on Instagram, where you can click on the link tree, and it has right at the top, Thrive Community. Please jump on in. There's also a Thrive newsletter, which is free for everyone, comes out every Thursday. I always put in some nice health tips there, and it's a place I can share a little bit about what's going on with me, and you can connect with me. It's a great little newsletter, comes out once a week on Thursday. I hope you're taking advantage of that. I hope you're taking advantage of my free Facebook group, Modern Medicine Movement Health and Wellness Group, all these fun things. It's been an exciting couple of weeks, guys. I got my book coming out this summer in August. I was just on with my editor today, and oh my gosh, it's been amazing. I got the opportunity recently to reread the entire book, and it got me pumped up, even though they deleted a bunch of stuff, because I like to talk, I like to write, I like to give all the details, and they did take out, a fair amount. I think it was like 500 pages, and it's down to maybe 250 or 300 now or something, and I'm sure it'll be probably down to 200 by the time you get it, because they just want it to be super succinct and to the point, and you can go deeper with me in the Thrive community, or following me and things like that. We'll get deep, but the book has the essentials, and it is awesome. And there's lots of anecdotes, lots of personal and shared experience that is there. It was so fun to read it. Pretty soon you'll be able to jump on into the website called Preventable Book.com, where you can sign up to get all the news on when it's coming out, how you can pre-order, how you can grab that amazing book for you, your family, your loved ones, anybody who's interested in optimizing their health and their life and preventing those common killers out there. 7 out of 10 of the most common diseases worldwide are almost entirely preventable. So thepreventablebook.com. Can't wait to have that out for you guys. I also wanted to share a review I got this week from Me Sauer. It's a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for sending that over. If you haven't done it already, please get that going. It's so easy. Go over to Apple, scroll down where you see the 5 stars, click on the one farthest to the right, and click on Write a Review. And just tell me what you're learning, what you're loving. Teresa here says, 5 stars, quote, great tool to add to your daily health. I love learning from Dr. Hemingway. Great advice on eating healthy. If you're looking to learn more on what to add to your diet or what to take away from the diet or to get the results you've been looking for, these Modern Medicine Movement podcasts are a great tool to put into your toolbox of health. Thank you, Dr. Hemingway. Well, thank you, Teresa. I appreciate you so much. I read all of the reviews, guys, so please, if you haven't already, I know there's many that haven't. We've just had literally hundreds of thousands of downloads, and I think we only got 176 reviews. So come on, hit me with those reviews. I'm so grateful for you. It's why I do it. It's why I continue to do this week after week. In fact, today, I want you to know that this topic came from one of you. In fact, I love to podcast on things that you guys have questions about, that you have burning, health desires questions you just want to know. In fact, I'm doing an upcoming podcast exclusively from my Thrive community. They've been able to ask questions, and you still have a chance. If you haven't signed up yet, I haven't released that podcast. And so you will have the opportunity to ask me a question, and I will answer as many as I can on an upcoming podcast, and ask me anything. And these are from the Thrive community. So please join the Thrive community and hang out with me. The live Zoom calls are amazing. We're actually having one this weekend. It's going to be incredible. So anyway, so pumped, so grateful to have you guys. Today, I want to talk about something that I think many of us have had on our minds, at least in the last decade or so, and there's so much confusing information. And that is on soy. Is soy good? Is it bad? Is it somewhere in the middle? Like, what the heck? What's all this, what's all this chatter, right? That we've been hearing out there on soy. Like, what do we need to know? What do we need to know about soy? Well, here we go. All right. So anyway, soy, I think, became popularized in the 90s. I'm a child of the 70s and 80s, and I got my medical training in the 90s. I've been working as a physician since the late 90s. Over 20 years or more, I've been a physician now, and it's been amazing. And I remember kind of in the earlier parts of my training, medical school and onward, this thing started to pop up. They started to have these soy drinks everywhere. And everybody was saying, hey, you got to dump your milk and go to soy. You got to, dump your meat and go to tofu or what have you. And it was all the craze. And I'm not knocking soy. There's a lot of, and I'll tell you what they are later, but there's a lot of foods that I will eat that do contain soy. But I'll tell you what I'm not doing and why. Because there's also a little bit of controversy, a little bit of potential harm, depending on what soy products you're using, where they are coming from, whether it's a real whole soybean, edamame, which I'll admit, if I go to a Japanese restaurant, I'm ordering me some fresh, organic edamame with all of those Japanese spicy seasonings. I love that stuff. It's just kind of fun, right? You get to play with it with your fingers. Shout out to anybody who likes to eat and play with their hands. My son and I swear we bond over eating sometimes because he is the messiest eater. We'll go out to grass-fed steakhouse or whatever, and he'll grab ribs, and his hands get so just sticky and slimy, whatever. And then we'll lick our fingers, and it's quite an experience. And edamame is one of those things I love to, take those beans out one by one, kind of chew and savor the shells with all those spices. And the reason I love it, one, is because it's a real food. It's whole. Please try to get the organic because, oh my gosh, guys, most of the soy out there, not too much different from most of the corn and wheat and all of these major, foods that literally take up about 50% of our diet. Did you know, I just got to chime this in because as I was reading my book, I was reminded of this. Over 50% of our calories as humans come from 3 or 4 primary foods. And they are, drumroll please, we get over 50% of our calories from wheat and corn and rice. And a close fourth is soy. So those 4 crops give us as humans in present day over 50% of our calories. And this is not necessarily a good thing because of most of the corn, most of the wheat, most of the soy, most of the rice that's out there is not, produced, grown, cultivated in the best way. In fact, most of it is GMO. Most of it is laden with pesticides. Most of it is not awesome. And so we'll talk about these things coming up. But back to the 90s where soy was kind of making its mark, there was all this hype about how the folks in Asia, were just pounding the soy, right? The tofu, the edamame, the miso. Shout out to anybody who loves miso soup. Oh my gosh, I love that stuff. And I think why I like it is because it's aged a little bit, right? It's fermented. Things just get better with time, right, guys? Like with you and me. I'm going to be 50 soon, and I just feel like we get better with time. If, we do these health practices, we can easily get better with time. But in those, 90s, we were kind of seeing that there were groups of people in Asia that were way healthier than we were here in the US and the Western world. And one of the things that they tended to include in their diet, which we did not, at least to the degree that they did, was soy. And the soy products like edamame and tofu and miso and natto. Shout out for all you guys who know what natto is. They were including these kinds of things in their diet. And I'll admit that when these studies first came out, the quality of the data was not that good. In other words, these were what they call observational studies, which means that they didn't take 2 groups and one was the control group and one was the intervention group where one got the soy, one did not. It wasn't a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, trial. It was not that. It was literally just an observation that the folks over there tended to be a little bit healthier than the folks over here. And one of the differences, there were many, I'm sure, was that they were eating more soy and we were not. But like I said, this was observational, which means that the data is not causative. In other words, there is a correlation, perhaps, but eating soy did not necessarily make them healthier. And we'll talk about more of what that means. I'm not saying that it didn't help, But probably the thing that helped even more than that was the fact that they were not eating all the crap that we were eating in the 90s, right? And today, all those highly processed, highly refined grains and sugars and flours and things that come in a bag or a box or with a barcode, right? The 3 Bs that I always remind us to try to avoid. These folks were not eating that way. And so when the data first came out, it was observational and it was not causation. It was correlation, which is a good start, but we needed more trials. And so I'll present more of the data as we go through on this soy thing. But what was initially discovered was that these groups of people in Asia had less heart disease. They had less cancer. They had less of a lot of chronic illnesses. They were less overweight, less fat. Right here in the US, super sad. We are among the fattest country in the world. Like literally, our obesity rates are climbing each and every year. What pains me so much is our children are really at risk for this, because if we're buying up all this stuff in bags and boxes with a barcode, these quick fix meals and treats and snacks and all these things, the kids don't have a chance. And if we're overweight, they're going to be overweight most likely. And so it's got to start with us. It's got to be generational. We got to give them the tools. We got to be the example for them. And so that's what bums me out with our rising obesity rates, is not only that we are overweight, but our children are also overweight. And there's a lot we can do about it. And that's why I wrote the book. That's why I do these shows, the podcasts, all of this stuff, because there's so much we can do about it. But what was initially discovered in the 90s about soy and the products that were consumed primarily by those in Asia, which were not the same types of soy products that we've been consuming here in the US. We took this kind of soy thing in the 90s and we were like, yeah, soy looks like the bomb. Let's take it and pulverize it and make it into protein powders and make it into these soy milk drinks. Like, shout out to all you guys who started substituting, swapping your milk with soy milk. You know, maybe it was the Silk brand or some other brand. I can confess we did that for a while. Now we never buy soy milk. I still eat some soy products, and I'll tell you which ones I eat, but I never buy soy milk. I never buy soy protein. I try to stay away from a lot of those because they are so highly processed, and often they come from non-organic, GMO, pesticide-ridden crops. Like literally, they come from not good origins, and they're pulverized in the processing. And so they're different than the soy that the folks in Japan or China or over there were eating, because they were eating things like miso or natto or, you know, the tempeh. They were eating real whole soy and soy products, often fermented ones. And so it was a lot different than what we were doing here in the US. We kind of caught this bandwagon and we were like, hey, that looks good. Let's just pulverize it and make it into a snack food. Let's make it into a protein powder. Let's make it into a milk. Let's make it into this and that and everything else. And all of a sudden, everything is soy. And then we started to get some data that were like, oh my gosh, like we got to be careful, right? Soy has some potential negative consequences. There's this thing called the isoflavones, which is within soy, and it's a protein within the soy protein that has some potential endocrine disruption effect. What the heck is that? That's a big word, doc. Endocrine disruptor potentially could be soy. And typically that's coming from the processed soys, right? The soy proteins, the soy powders, the soy that's being included oftentimes in the milk. If we do too much of this, we pound it, and we're putting all of these processed soys in our diet, we can get potentially too much of this endocrine disrupting effect, which tends to be an estrogen-like effect. In other words, if you are a dude and you're consuming tons and tons of processed soy products, you could potentially start to exhibit some female qualities, right? You can start to maybe have a little gynecomastia, which is, you know, some breast development, or lose some of your hair in the places that maybe you want it. You know, you might be losing some facial hair and losing and gaining fat in the places you don't want fat, like around the midsection and the hips and legs and things like that. And so there is potential, if we overdo it with soy, that it can have this estrogen type effect. And so they've looked at this, and the studies have been a little bit controversial, because some studies will show that soy is good for you and could prevent some cancers. And then others say that, well, if you have cancer, especially if you're a woman, say you have breast cancer, and you're consuming tons and tons of soy products, you can get some of this phytoestrogen effect, which is In other words, like stimulating potentially growth of that breast cancer. In other words, if you have breast cancer, I would not be recommending you pound a bunch of soy products. In fact, let me just want to share with you a study here that talks about that exactly. And it's interesting because this is stuff that we've known about since the early 2000s. This was from 2001, and it's called Effects of the Soy Phytoestrogens on Breast Cancer Growth. And what they did is they gave, actually not super high concentrations, they gave kind of mild to moderate concentrations of these soy proteins that were phytoestrogens to folks who actually they did in animal studies because they were kind of nervous, right, to give it to folks with cancer because they had this concern already. And they found that indeed it was not good for cancer, breast cancer is what they were looking at, because it counteracted the main treatment of breast cancer, which is tamoxifen. And it also, it said it could stimulate breast cancer growth. And so they concluded that women with current or past breast cancer should be aware of the risks of potential tumor growth when taking soy products. Now, this is one study. There's been many others like this. There's been some that have been negative and some that have been neutral, but there's been quite a few that have been positive in this way, showing that it could be risky to consume a bunch of soy products if you already have breast cancer. Now, as I mentioned a little while ago, primarily, in my humble opinion, it's overdoing it with the processed types of soy, right? If we're eating the whole soybean that's organic, we're taking that edamame that's organic and we're eating that, or we're having a fermented soy product like miso or tempeh or natto, I just really don't feel like this is quite the same as if we're just, pounding the soy milk and having soy protein and all of these other soys that are more highly processed. And so I don't want to tell you, definitively that you shouldn't have soy, but I would like to introduce some caution, especially in the folks that either do have or have had breast cancer, because there is sort of a reason to be concerned because of this phytoestrogen or this endocrine disrupting type effect. And the other area this has been controversial as well is with respect to thyroid illness. And so many people nowadays have some version of thyroid illness. Most of it is a lower functioning or a hypoactive thyroid, either a full-blown thyroid issue, which is hypothyroidism, where you may have to take supplemental thyroid in the form of like Armour thyroid, or there's many others that are out there, or you may really need to boost. There's actually several things in your diet. If you add selenium, for example, that can be helpful with thyroid. If you add zinc, that can be helpful as well. But oftentimes folks have to take a thyroid replacement. And there's a group of people that are at risk for being in the low thyroid sector, which is, they call it clinical hypothyroidism. So they may not have all of the features of full-blown low thyroid, which are like low energy, weight gain, you feel cold all the time. There's, 100 symptoms of low thyroid, and these people may just have a couple of them and their doctor hasn't quite diagnosed it because they did a blood test, and usually that's just one called TSH, which is just kind of a quote-unquote screening test, and that just does not give you the full picture. So if you're concerned you may have thyroid issues, folks, get the full panel. If your doctor only does one test and it's called the TSH and they tell you it's quote-unquote within the normal range, just say, I'm sorry, I've learned that it's important to check the actual levels of thyroid in my blood, like something called a T3 and a T4. These are the actual, active thyroid, free T3, for example, the active thyroid in the blood. And that's going to be way more helpful than just this TSH, which is kind of a downstream effect, and the ranges are so broad that your doctor will say, oh, well, you're within the normal range. Well, you need to ask the question, well, where am I on that range? Am I at the low end, in the medium end, I'm at the high end? Like, where do I fall in that range? Because that range is huge, like literally orders of magnitude across the range. And so I am not happy with how this testing is done by most medical doctors out there. I really feel like they often do us a disservice by not giving us enough information. You should really get a full thyroid panel, which has both the TSH, the thyroid hormone, the free T4, the free T3, the active thyroid hormone, also a reverse T3, thyroid antibodies. There's a whole bunch that you should add to that, and most doctors are just not doing it. So if you need to find another doctor, you might need to do that. You might want to search for a functional medicine doctor. They're way better at treating and diagnosing this. They usually do the full panel. You can find a functional medicine doctor at IFM, which is the Institute of Functional Medicine.org, and find a doctor near you. I would highly recommend that. But going back to thyroid, this study is called The Effect of Soy Phytoestrogen Supplementation on Thyroid Status in Patients with Subclinical Hypothyroidism, a randomized double-blind crossover study. So in this study, they took folks who were at risk for low thyroid, those that actually had some labs showing concerns for low thyroid. Maybe they didn't have all the full-blown symptoms yet, and half of them, they got low-dose soy protein, and the other half of them, they didn't. And so in this, let's see how many weeks, 8 weeks, they did this. They basically took their testing to check and see if their thyroid got better, got worse, what have you. And they found that they had those that were taking the soy that already had a potential low thyroid, a subclinical hypothyroidism, it got worse. In fact, it says here in the conclusion, there's a 3-fold increased risk of developing overt hypothyroidism with supplementation of soy phytoestrogens in folks with subclinical hypothyroidism. And so there was a risk, especially if you already have potentially low thyroid. If you consume a whole bunch of soy products, you are at risk for even dipping lower in your thyroid function. So it's something to potentially be concerned about. Once again, I think the thing rounding it out that matters most is we got to consider the quality and the source of the soy we're eating. I'm not going to tell you that all soy is bad. I do consume some soy products. As I mentioned to you at the outset, I love edamame, all the spicy Japanese seasonings on there, which is a whole, soybean, right? It's whole. It's not pulverized. It's not processed. I'm not buying soy protein, for example. And if you eat it in that way, if it's organic, preferably, that's how I would recommend it. Or if you're going to be consuming it in something that's been somewhat processed, like in a miso soup or a tempeh or even tofu or natto, I would recommend that come. Hopefully you can get that stuff that comes from organic soy, because so much of that soy out there, as well as the corn and the wheat and the rice that's out there, is not organic. And I think it really, really matters with all of these 4 main crops that we're consuming, over 50% of our diet. It really, really matters that we get those organically, because then we're not going to be at risk for all the issues with the pesticides that have been used to cultivate them. Glyphosate is literally the tip of the iceberg. There are many others as well that are potentially issues for us and our children. And I don't even want to get into that. That's a whole podcast in and of itself. But if we're going to consume soy, I would recommend that we do it in whole foods or minimally processed, like I mentioned, the tofu, the tempeh, et cetera, et cetera. Miso, that's probably my favorite. I love miso. I love the edamame, as I mentioned, because when you consume the products that were made from pulverized soy, which is mainly like the soy protein, you're missing out anyway on a lot of the benefits. I mean, soy itself has, potential benefits when you eat the whole soybean. In fact, one of the things I haven't mentioned yet that's been shown to do is it can help regulate and lower blood sugar. In fact, a lot of these studies that looked at supplementation with the soy in the whole form, they found, they weren't looking for this, but they found that their blood sugar balance got better, their insulin resistance got better, they actually had decreased inflammation, and that was something that was found with the whole soy product and not so much in these pulverized protein substitutes. And so when we take something that's good, and we as humans, we are often guilty of this, we think we can outsmart nature, right? We think, oh, well, soy is good, right? So I'm going to take this soybean, I'm going to pulverize it, make it into a powder, strip it of a lot of its phytonutrients, and just get that protein out of there, because it is one of the few vegan protein options that's a complete protein. it's different still than animal protein like whey because it doesn't have the same amounts of leucine and things, but it is, it does contain all of the 9 amino acids. And so we think that we can outsmart nature. But when we do that, we're losing out on a lot of the other important beneficial nutrient, so-called phytonutrient effects that come from consuming the whole soybean, for example. One of the other things that it can do when we consume the whole soybean is it has been found to reduce blood pressure. It's also been found to, as I mentioned, help with blood sugar balance, decrease inflammation. Actually, I was looking at, there were 17 different studies that were looking actually at blood sugar and insulin, and they were predominantly positive with this respect when consuming the whole soybean, the full bean, the edamame. And so it can be beneficial. There's also been other studies that show that it can help with fertility, probably because it boosts the estrogen level, right? And so those that actually are looking to get pregnant, are looking to get improved fertility, maybe you want to consume a little bit of extra edamame, the soybean, because it may potentially increase your estrogen, which will make the, uterus more ready for that pregnancy and things like that. And so there's definitely been some studies showing benefits of soy. And even in other cases, especially with women that are going through menopause, these potential phytoestrogen effects of soy could help kind of blunt the hot sweat, the hot flashes, the cold sweats, all these kinds of things that are associated with menopause, because that's a time where naturally the body's estrogen is decreasing. So women that are supplementing with, some extra soybeans, some edamame, some tofu, some miso soup, eating extra of that during this time, this could actually help them. And there's been some studies that look at that, and some research that's showing that it can reduce the frequencies of really bad hot flashes, for example. And so there's definitely benefits to soy. And so I'm not going to say that it's not a good thing. I personally love some of the soy products out there, especially the edamame that's organic. And I love miso, tofu, not as much. I like tempeh. I like natto. There's definitely, I got to say, just the full bean, the edamame spiced up is probably my favorite. So I do consume soy, but I don't consume the processed, pulverized, soy protein and the soy found in some of these other products that are processed. And so I would caution you to, look at where you're getting your soy from. Number one, please look, is it organic? Organic is always going to trump the non-organic, especially in soy, because when they're cultivating these soybeans, they are spraying the heck out of these fields with all kinds of pesticides, including things like glyphosate, which is not awesome for the body. I should probably do a whole podcast on glyphosate because I find it really interesting. And every year there's so many more research studies showing, what's really happening, although the government kind of denies it. And, I think there's issues with the companies that are out there and sort of backdoor, agreements and handshakes and things that happen that, and a lot of this information is not getting to us. We've been told that, it doesn't matter, that these are safe, it's fine, pesticides are okay. It's like, what? That doesn't even make sense. Not only are they not natural, but think about pesticides kind of as an antibiotic for plants, if you will. We know that antibiotics for humans, they just have the potential to wreck our gut health. And they can do the same in plants. And if we eat those plants, we can have the same things happen to us. It can ruin our gut health. And there's so many downstream, that's really just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many other negative effects of things like glyphosate, phthalates, and things like that. I should really do a whole podcast. If you guys are interested in learning more about that, let me know. Shoot me an email. Reach out to me on Facebook or on Instagram at Aloha Surf Doc or at Modern Medicine Movement. Tell me if that's a topic that interests you, because it's a pretty lengthy one and it would involve a lot of catching up on the research, because studies are popping up literally on the daily. So when considering whether to add or subtract or use soy in your diet, just be aware of the potential for the endocrine disruption, which is that phytoestrogen effect. Like for me as a dude, I'm not going to be buying soy protein powder or drinking soy milk. I don't feel like I want a whole bunch of extra estrogen, as a dude. And so I'm not consuming that, but I do consume the whole soybean occasionally with a nice Japanese steakhouse meal or something like that. So be aware of that. Be aware of potential cancer risks. If you already have breast cancer or are with a family history of it or being treated for it, you probably don't want to be having a bunch of soy in your diet. If you have a low thyroid function or kind of borderline, probably also don't want to be having a bunch of soy in your diet. And also one thing I haven't even mentioned, but soy contains what are called anti-nutrients. And I talk a little bit about this in my book because many of us just have no idea. And there's some folks out there speaking of, things like lectins. Soy has a bunch of lectins and anti-nutrients in it, which basically it is what it says, right? If it's an anti-nutrient, it basically makes it difficult to get the nutritional value out of that soybean because of all the anti-nutrients. And one of the ways that we can derive benefit from, certain beans, especially this one, the soybean, is if it has been fermented, if it's gone through a fermentative process, with bacteria, yeast, what have you. It actually goes through kind of like a pre-digestion kind of process, and it makes the nutrients more available to us. So that's why I'm ad nauseum, right? Talking about things like tempeh and miso and natto. These things are a version of fermented soy because they make the phytonutrients that are beneficial in the soybean. Remember all those I talked about, those that are blood pressure lowering, blood sugar lowering, balancing of the blood sugar and helping with insulin resistance and those sorts of things. Those are more common when we consume the fermented soy, which is the natto, the tempeh, the miso, for example. And so other issues with whole soy sometimes and some of the soy proteins and the phytonutrients there that are pulverized and highly processed is I was looking at a bunch of studies, and I don't want to bore you. I read 3 or 4 in this respect that talked about how there are, as I mentioned, the anti-nutrients in soy. They can actually cause a little bit of what we refer to as leaky gut. And that's kind of, our gut is literally this almost tennis court sized surface area that's open to the outside world. And it is literally less than 1 cell thick, the gap that is between each of those cells. It's called the gap junction. And if that gets a little relaxed and gets leaky, like literally things that we eat can get into our bloodstream that easily through this teeny tiny barrier called the gap junction. And leaky gut is when those sort of tight junctions get relaxed and stuff can get in, be it chemicals or, bad food or bacteria that shouldn't be getting into our bloodstream. You guys have heard of endotoxemia. That's how this happens. And one of the things that too much soy has been shown to do is, and the anti-nutrients that are in there. So if we're consuming a whole bunch of soy powders and highly processed ones that aren't fermented, that aren't whole, it can reduce the gut barrier function and cause leaky gut. Like I read 3 different studies that show this, which causes a lot of issues, right? Inflammation, brain fog, food intolerances. I mean, all these kinds of things, rashes, and it's not awesome. So in summary, not all soy is created equal, right? There's good soy and not so good soy. And those that I would rank up there as the better versions of soy would be the minimally or unprocessed ones that are basically eating the whole soybean and things like edamame. Or even better, actually, even more nutrient available will be if we eat soy in its fermented form. Miso soup, tempeh, right? Natto. If we're eating it that way, it's going to be even more beneficial because it'll have those anti-nutrients mostly taken out, and we can actually get some of the nutrient qualities. So not all soy is created equal. The less processed, the better. If it's being pulverized and put into powders, either protein powder or it's, we've talked ad nauseum about like soybean oil, right? Not good. These are highly processed, pulverized, high pressure, high heat is how you can get oil out of the soybean, and that's considered a seed oil. Not a fan, definitely not where I want to be getting my soy. And so steer clear of anything that says soybean oil. Oh my gosh, avoid it like the plague. And if you want the nitty gritty on that, go back and listen to the podcast on the seed oils. And soy bean oil is one of those. So not awesome. It's highly processed. We want to steer clear of that. So when you take a look at all the things out there that might have soy in there, soybean oil is one of the most common, and any of those you should dump. That is a seed oil. It's highly inflammatory. It can cause leaky gut. It can cause so many illnesses and problems. And what's an issue with these seed oils is that get incorporated into your own cell. They start to make up you, because like my grandmother always said, you are what you eat. And so we don't want to be made up of soybean oil. This is a highly processed oil, super inflammatory, not awesome. And so the bottom line is the quality and the source is everything. And the least processed is better. And that almost goes with almost any kind of food. The more processed it is, the less nutrient value. We're all at risk for this calorically, dense diet where everything we reach for from a package, or a box that has a label, it's so full of calories, but almost devoid, almost with no nutrients. Why else would they have to quote unquote enrich, your cereal or your bread or whatever? Because they're stripping away all of these nutrients when they do the processing. So try to avoid the processed soy, like the soybean oil. A lot of the soy proteins are not awesome. I'm not saying they're all crap. There's definitely some that are better than others. I personally don't like to use soy protein. I just feel like there's better options out there. And if you want more on that, there's a whole podcast or 2 or 3 that I've done on protein. In fact, in my Thrive community, I literally just did a whole masterclass on protein. So you can still join now and catch that replay. It's awesome. All the stuff you want to know about protein. So remember, less is more with respect to processing. If you're going to get the nutrients and make advantage of the things that soy can do for you, like potentially lower blood pressure, improve your blood sugar balance, then eating the fermented, the tempeh, the miso, the natto, the fermented is way, way better. And so, just always, like with anything, read the label. Don't buy crap with soybean oil. Absolutely not. Try to go by the 5-ingredient rule. It's really super simple. I try to keep it easy, keep it simple. My favorite thing I learned in 5th grade was the keep it simple, sweetie. Just keep it simple. KISS. It's something that doesn't have to be hard, doesn't have to be difficult, doesn't have to be challenging. And so I just want you guys to know that soy is all of the above. It can be amazing. It can be so-so, and it can even be bad for you. And so the bad for you part, definitely all those highly processed foods that contain soybean oil, avoid it literally like the plague. Try to get your stuff minimally, if not unprocessed, from organic farms. Buy the organic stuff, please, 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 and eat the fermented ones, right? The tempeh, the miso, my favorite, guys, miso soup. If you haven't tried it yet, put it on your list of things to do this week. I always encourage you guys to try something new. There's so many things out there. There's literally 300,000 edible plants out there, and we eat 3 or 4 of them, making up half of our caloric intake. This is embarrassing. It is really embarrassing. We got to get rid of all those highly processed corn products, wheat products, rice and soy products. That is not what we want. We want real food. We got to go back to the basics, guys. Got to go back to the basics. Eat real food like our ancestors did. We will be so much healthier. So thank you for being here. Please follow me at Aloha Surf Doc, at Modern Medicine Movement. My link tree there has all of the cool stuff that you're going to want, including membership to my free Facebook group, my free newsletter, and jump on into the Thrive community. If you want more, you want to be more, you want to do more with your health, with a lot of added support, with camaraderie, with other folks with the same mission, join me in the Thrive community. Until next time, aloha.